Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So the typical quiz I like to give, what holiday is coming up next?
Lag BaOmer.
Lag BaOmer, not quite. I know, it's a tricky one.
Before Wednesday?
Pesach Sheni.
Oh.
Oh, Pesach Sheni, of course. How could I forget Pesach Sheni? Because you don't need it. What is Pesach Sheni? Pesach Sheni is an amazing part of our ritual life that goes almost entirely unnoticed every year. But in the ancient world, it was absolutely essential. So picture, if you will, the scenario. You are a wonderful, God-fearing Jewish person, but unfortunately you have a loved one that passes away a very short time, a couple days before the holiday of Pesach. And as this is the ancient world, of course, they are passing away there in your home. And you being in the room with them in the preparations of helping them to be buried, of course, you're going to come into contact with them. This tumah, this ritual impurity that comes from being in contact with the deceased, that will prevent you from being able to go to the Temple of Jerusalem, from being able to offer the Passover sacrifice, and from being able to eat from the Passover sacrifice. Well, I guess that means you're out of luck for that year, right? Sorry, bad luck, try again next year, you just missed the chance. Well, no. In fact, you get to do Pesach Sheni. Literally 1 month later, to the day, those people who were ritually impure, or who were too far to be able to make it to the temple for Passover at the original time, or for any other reason according to our halakhic understanding of it, those people, even if they were just a few feet from being able to get there, if they missed it, they can come at Pesach Sheni 1 month later. They could offer the sacrifice and they could eat from that Passover meat in their own private Seder, if you will, 1 month later. Now, this may not seem very relevant to us. I mean, after all, the modern manifestations of Pesach Sheni are tiny. They are imperceptible for anyone but the most careful readers of Jewish liturgical deviations. But why is Pesach Sheni important for us to remember nonetheless? It is because of how Pesach Sheni gets inaugurated, of how it gets created. The first Passover was inaugurated, of course, in the land of Egypt. God said to Moses, "Tell the children of Israel, yada yada yada, right? You will have the ceremony. It will be for your generations, for all time. You'll have the Passover. You'll put the blood on the door. You'll eat from it, right?" We all are familiar with the command that God gave. We celebrate that every year with Pesach. But at that time, in the land of Egypt, God doesn't mention Pesach Sheni. No hint that this is a thing. Instead, it takes until the next time when they are about to celebrate Passover as a commemoration of the first one, now in the wilderness of Sinai, and there are some guys that are unable to participate because of ritual impurity. And so they go up and they knock on Moses' tent, which I'm sure would have made more of a flappy noise, and they say, "Excuse me, Mr. Moses, sir, but what about us? We couldn't have the Passover sacrifice. Are we just out of luck? Do we just have to wait an entire year?" And Moses says to them, "That's a really good question. Stay here, and I will go inquire of God and see what God wants us to do in this situation." And Moses goes to God, and he says, "God, I've got a couple guys outside, and they're a little confused. They wanted to do Passover, but they couldn't because of your command. Is there anything we can do? Is there anything, he's talking to his manager to see if there's any accommodation he can make for the customers." And God says, "Yes, of course, here. Whether they are ritually impure or too far, or all the other conditions that I mentioned, anyone in that situation, not just these guys, but anyone in that situation can come 1 month later on Pesach Sheni and be able to offer the sacrifice, to eat from it, etc., etc." Moses comes back out and he tells them, "Great news, guys! 1 month later, you're going to have your chance." and Pesach Sheni is born. Now, couldn't that have all just been put into place originally? We have a few instances where there are commandments that are only given in response to inquiries. And it always seems a little odd. It's not like God didn't know this would be an issue. It's God, after all. It's not as though God couldn't have worked in the language of Pesach Sheni into the initial giving of the commandment of Passover. It's God. God would have been able to edit that right in to the book of Exodus. But then we would have missed something very important. We would have missed the narrative that when there is a problem, when there is a question, when there is something that we're not sure how we can handle it because we know that things are different than we were expecting, that we ask. That we ask. That we raise our hand up and we say, excuse me, Judaism, but how do I handle this? Now, sometimes the answer is very obvious because Judaism has dealt with a lot of questions that you may not even begin to know. I've done courses before on all of the strange scenarios that Judaism has wrestled with. But sometimes your question is absolutely new. When electricity was invented, somebody raised their hand and said, excuse me, what do we do about this electricity thing, especially on Shabbat? More about that in my Pathway to Judaism class next Thursday. On the other hand, if someone is saying, Torah, they've invented this thing called in vitro fertilization. How does that work in Judaism? And we go back into Torah and through our legal codes and we unravel how it works in Judaism. But that only happens because we have been encouraged by the story of Pesach Sheni and other places in the Torah to recognize that when there is a question, when there is a problem, even when we have made the mistake, the correct response is not to hang our head and go, oh, I guess I messed up, I guess I missed it, I guess it's just not possible. The correct response is to say, excuse me, and then to ask the question. This is what has given Judaism its strength, its vitality, and its ability to listen to all of those who may think that Judaism doesn't have an answer for them. Maybe thinks that Judaism is not responsive to their needs. We can say, without fear of contradiction, if you have a question, if you have a problem, ask, and Judaism will find an answer. It may not always be the answers you'd like. You can't please everybody all the time. But there will be an answer. There will be a response. You will not be told your question is a stupid question. You will not be told that your question is a pointless question. You will be treated with respect, with dignity, and together we will find an answer. Together we will continue the process of making Judaism responsive to the questions, to the needs of each person and each generation. Like I said, we may not always be happy with the answers that we get, but then that's part of being a mature person, to recognize that it's the seeking together that is truly the greatest treasure, not always getting just what we think we want. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.